The Varieties of Religious Experience, a Study in Human Nature by William James, continues. Lectures 16 and 17. Mysticism. In the Christian Church, there have always been mystics. Although many of them have been viewed with suspicion, some have gained favor in the eyes of the authorities. The experiences of these have been treated as precedents, and a codified system of mystical theology has been based upon them, in which everything legitimate finds its place. The basis of the system is horizon, or meditation. Well, systematic, not this blanking the mind nonsense, but the methodical elevation of the soul towards God. Gores's Christliche Mystik gives a full account of the facts, so does Rebet's Mystique Divine, 2 volumes, Paris, 1890. A still more methodical modern work is the Mystica Theologia of Valgornia, 2 volumes, Turin, 1890. The basis of the system. Through the practice of horizon, the higher levels of mystical experience may be attained. It is odd that Protestantism, especially evangelical Protestantism, should seemingly have abandoned everything methodical in this line. Apart from what prayer may lead to, Protestant mystical experience appears to have been almost exclusively sporadic. It has been left to our mind cures to reintroduce methodical meditation into our religious life. The first thing to be aimed at in horizon is the mind's detachment from outer sensations, for these interfere with the concentration upon ideal things. Such manuals as St. Ignatius's Spiritual Exercises recommend the disciple to expel sensation by a graduated series of efforts to imagine holy scenes. The acme of this kind of discipline would be a semi-hallucinatory monoideism, an imaginary figure of Christ, for example, coming fully to occupy the mind. Sensorial images of this sort, whether literal or symbolic, play an enormous part in mysticism, but in certain cases imagery may fall away entirely, and in the very highest raptures it tends to do so. The state of consciousness becomes then insusceptible of any verbal description. Mystical teachers are unanimous as to this. St. John of the Cross, for instance, one of the best of them, thus describes the condition called the union of love, which he says is reached by dark contemplation. In this, the deity compenetrates the soul, but in such a hidden way that the soul enormous part of mysticism. M. Rekajak, in a recent volume, makes an essential mysticism he defines as a tendency to draw near the absolute morally and by the aid of symbols. In his Fondements de la Connaissance Mystique, Paris, 1897, page 66, but there are unquestionably mystical conditions in which sensible symbols play no part. That the soul finds no terms, continuing the text is regular, away from the note, finds no terms, no means, no comparisons whereby to render the sublimity of the wisdom and the delicacy of the spiritual feeling with which she is filled. We receive this mystical knowledge of God clothed in none of the kinds of images, in none of the sensible representations which our mind makes use of in other circumstances. Accordingly, in this knowledge, since the senses and imagination are not employed, we get neither form nor impression, nor can we give any account or furnish any likeness, although the mysterious and sweet-tasting wisdom comes home so clearly to the inmost parts of our soul. Fancy a man seeing a certain kind of thing for the first time in his life. He can understand it, use and enjoy, but he cannot apply a name to it, nor communicate any idea of it, even though all the while it will be a mere thing of sense. How much greater will be his powerlessness when he goes beyond the senses. This is the peculiarity of the divine language. The more infused, intimate, spiritual, and supersensible it is, the more does it exceed the senses, both inner and outer, and impose silence upon them. The soul then feels as if placed in a vast and profound solitude, to which no created thing has access, in an immense and boundless desert. The more delicious, the more solitary it is. There, in the abyss of wisdom, the soul grows by what it drinks in from the well springs of the comprehension of love, and recognizes, however sublime and learned may be the terms we employ, how utterly vile, insignificant, and improper they are, when we seek to discourse of divine things by their means. I cannot pretend to detail to you the sundry stages of the Christian mystical life. Our time would not suffice for one thing, and moreover I confess that the subdivisions and names which we find in the Catholic books seem to me to represent nothing objectively distinct. So many men, so many minds, I imagine that these experiences can be infinitely varied, as are the idiosyncrasies of individuals. The cognitive aspects of them, their value, and the way of revelation is what we are directly concerned with, and it is easy to show by citation how strong an impression they leave of them, being revelations of the new depth of truth. St. Teresa is the expert of experts in describing such conditions. So I will turn immediately to what she says of one of the highest of them, the horizon of union. In the horizon of union, says St. Teresa, the soul is fully awake with regards to God, but wholly asleep as regards things of this world and in respect of herself. During the short time the union lasts, she is, as it were, deprived of every feeling, and even if she would, she could not think of any single thing. St. John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul, Book 2, Chapter 17, in V et Ouvres, 3me, edition, Paris, 1893, 3, 428, 432, Chapter 9 of Book 2 of St. John's Ascent of Carmel is devoted to showing the harmfulness for this mystical life of the use of sensible imagery. Okay, is that the quote? Did I share that? And the Christian mystical life, he's saying, in particular, William James admits of the visual and auditory hallucinations, verbal and graphic automisms, and such marvels as levitation, stigmatization, and the healing of disease. These phenomena, which mystics have often presented, are believed to have presented, have no essential mystical significance, for they occur with no consciousness of illumination whatever. For when they occur, as they often do in persons of non-mystical mind, consciousness of illumination is for us the essential mark of mystical states. Okay. And on to the regular text now. Thus she needs to employ no artifice in order to arrest the use of her understanding. It remains so stricken with inactivity that she neither knows what she loves, nor in what manner she loves, nor what she wills. In short, she is utterly dead to the things of the world and lives solely in God. I do not even know whether in this state she has enough life left to breathe. It seems to me she has not, or at least that if she does breathe something of what is going on within her, but it has so little force now that it can act in no way whatsoever. So a person who falls into a deep faint appears as if dead. Thus does God, when he raises a soul to union with himself, suspend the natural action of all her faculties. She neither sees, hears, nor understands so long as she is united with God. But this time is always short, and it seems even shorter than it is. God establishes himself in the interior of this soul in such a way that when she returns to herself, it is wholly impossible for her to doubt that she has been in God and God in her. Well, if God's omnipresent, that's true with everybody, right? The truth remains so strongly impressed on her that, even though many years pass without the condition returning, she can neither forget the favor she received nor doubt of its reality. If you nevertheless ask how it is possible that the soul can see and understand that she has been in God, since during the union she has neither sight nor understanding. I reply that she does not see it then, but that she sees it clearly later, after she has returned to herself, not by any vision, but by a certitude which abides with her, and which God alone can give her. I knew a person who was ignorant of the truth that God's mode of being in everything must be either by presence, by power, or by essence, but who, after having received the grace of which I am speaking, believed this truth in the most unshakable manner, so much that, having consulted a half-learned man who was as ignorant on this point as she had been before she was enlightened, when he replied that God is in us only by grace, she disbelieved his reply, so sure was she was of the true answer, and when she came to ask wiser doctors, they confirmed her in her belief, which much consoled her. But how, you will repeat, can one have such certainty in respect to what one does not see? This question I am powerless to answer. These are secrets of God's omnipotence, which it does not appertain to me to penetrate. All that I know is that I tell the truth. I shall never believe that any soul who does not possess this certainty has ever been really united to God. And all that's a quote from The Interior Castle, Fifth Abode, Chapter 1, in the Ouvres, translated by Louis. I think that's how you're supposed to pronounce it, but Volume 3, pages 421 to 424. The kinds of truth communicable in mystical ways, whether these be sensible or supersensible, are various. Some of them relate to this world, visions of the future, the reading of hearts, the sudden understanding of texts, the knowledge of distant events, for example, but the most important revelations are theological or metaphysical. St. Ignatius confessed one day to Father Lainez that a single hour of meditation at the Manresa has taught him more truths about heavenly things than all the teachings of the doctors put together could have taught him. One day in Horizon, on the steps of the choir of the Dominican Church, he saw in a distinct manner the plan of divine wisdom in the creation of the world. On another occasion, during a procession, his spirit was ravished in God, and it was given him to contemplate, in a form and images fitted to the weak understanding of a dweller on the earth, the deep mystery of the Holy Trinity. This last vision flooded his heart with such sweetness that the mere memory of it in after times made him shed abundant tears. Bartoli Michel Vide de Saint Ignace de Loyola, Volume 1, pages 34 to 36. Others have had illuminations about the created world. Jacob Boheme, for instance, at the age of 25, he was surrounded by the divine light and replenished with the heavenly knowledge, insomuch as going abroad into the fields to a green at Gorlitz, he there sat down, and viewing the herbs and grass of the field in his inward light, he saw into their essences, use, and properties, which was discovered to him by their lineaments, figures, and signatures. Of a latter period of experience he writes, "In 1/4 of an hour I saw and knew more than if I had been many years together at university. For I saw and knew the being of all things, the abyss and the abyss, and the eternal generation of the Holy Trinity, the descent and original of the world, and all creatures through the divine wisdom. I knew and saw myself all the three worlds, the external and visible world being of a procreation or external birth from both the internal and spiritual worlds. And I saw and I knew the whole working existence in the evil and in the good, and the mutual original and existence, and likewise how the fruitful bearing womb of eternity brought forth, so that I did not only greatly wonder at it, but did also exceedingly rejoice, albeit I could very hardly apprehend the same in my external man, and set it down with the pen, for I had a thorough view of the universe as in a chaos, wherein all things are couched and wrapped up, but it was impossible for me to explicate the same." Jacob Beckman's Theosophic Philosophy, etc., by Edward Taylor, London, 1691, pages 425 and 427 abridged. So George Fox said, "I was come up to the state of Adam, in which he was before the fall. The creation was opened to me, and it was showed me how all things had their names given to them, according to their nature and virtue. I was at a stand in my mind whether I should practice physic for the good of mankind, seeing the nature and virtues of the creatures were so opened to me by the Lord. Journal, Philadelphia, no date, page 69. Contemporary clairvoyance abounds in similar revelations. Andrew Jackson Davis's cosmogonies, for example, are certain experiences related to the delectable reminiscences and memories of Henry Thomas Butterworth, Lebanon, Ohio, 1886. Similarly, with St. Teresa, one day being an horizon, she writes, "It was granted me to perceive in one instant how all things were seen and contained in God. I did not perceive them in their proper form, and nevertheless the view I had of them was of a sovereign clearness, and has remained vividly impressed upon my soul. It is one of the most signal of all the graces with which the Lord has granted me. The view is so subtle and delicate that the understanding cannot grasp it." V. page 581 and 582. She goes on to tell how it was as if the deity were an enormous and sovereignly limpid diamond, in which all her actions were contained in such a way that their full sinfulness appeared evident as never before. Remember that one thing with the alien ship, one of the more famous UFO sightings, and the person got burnt, and that diamond in the sky thing? On another day, she relates, while she was reciting the Athanasian Creed, our Lord made me comprehend in what way it is that one God can be in three persons. Well, it means God isn't omnipotent if you're going to make it like that, right? I mean, not omnipresent at the very least, but he made me see it so clearly that I remained as extremely surprised as I was comforted. And now, when I think of the Holy Trinity, or hear it spoken of, I understand how the three adorable persons form only one God, and I experience an unspeakable happiness. It was on still another occasion, it was given to St. Teresa to see and understand in what wise the Mother of God had been assumed into her place in heaven. And this V, page 574. The deliciousness of some of these states seemed to be beyond anything known in ordinary consciousness. It evidently involves organic sensibilities, for it is spoken of as something too extreme to be borne, and as verging on bodily pain. St. Teresa discriminates between pain in which the body has a part and a pure spiritual pain. Interior Castle's Sixth Abode, Chapter 11. For the bodily part in these celestial joys, she speaks of it as penetrating to the marrow of the bones, while its earthly pleasures affect only the surface of the senses. I think, she adds, that this is a just description, and I cannot make it better. But it is too subtle and piercing a delight for ordinary words to denote. God touches the wounds of his spear. References to ebriety and the nuptial union have to figure in the phraseology by which it is shadowed forth. Intellect and senses both swoon away in these highest states of ecstasy. If our understanding comprehends, says St. Teresa, it is in a mode which remains unknown to us, and it can understand nothing of what it comprehends. For my own part, I do not believe that it does comprehend, because, as I said, it does not understand itself to do so. I confess that it is all a mystery in which I am lost. V, page 198. In the condition called raptus, or ravishment by theologians, breathing and circulation are so depressed that it is a question among the doctors whether the soul be or be not temporarily severed from the body. One must read St. Teresa's descriptions and the very exact distinctions which she makes to persuade oneself that one is dealing not with imaginary experiences, but with phenomena which, however rare, follow perfect, definite psychological types. To the medical mind, these ecstasies signify nothing but suggested and imitated hypnoid states on an intellectual basis of superstition and a corporeal one of degeneration and hysteria. Undoubtedly, these pathological conditions have existed in many and possibly in all of the cases, but that fact tells us nothing about the value for knowledge of the consciousness which they induce. To pass a spiritual judgment upon these states, we must not content ourselves with superficial medical talk, but inquire into their fruits for life. Their fruits appear to have been various. Stupefaction, for one thing, seems not to have been altogether absent as a result. You may remember the helplessness in the kitchen and schoolroom of poor Margaret Mary Alacoque. Many other ecstasies would have perished but for the care taken of them by admiring followers. The otherworldliness encouraged by the mystical consciousness makes this over-abstraction from practical life particularly liable to befall mystics in whom the character is naturally passive and the intellect feeble, but in natively strong minds and characters we find quite opposite results. The great Spanish mystics, who carried the habit of ecstasy as far as it has often been carried, appear for the most part to have shown indomitable spirit and energy, and all the more so for the trances in which they indulged. St. Ignatius was a mystic, but his mysticism made him assuredly one of the most powerfully practical human engines that ever lived. St. John of the Cross, writing of the intuitions and touches by which God reaches the substance of the soul, tells us that they enrich it marvelously. A single one of them may be sufficient to abolish at a stroke certain imperfections of which the soul during its whole life had vainly tried to rid itself, and to leave it adorned with virtues and loaded with supernatural gifts. A single one of these intoxicating consolations may reward it for all the labors undergone in its life, even were they numberless. Invested with an invincible courage, filled with an impassioned desire to suffer for its God, the soul then is seized with the strange torment that of not being allowed to suffer enough. Varieties 2:320. St. Teresa is as emphatic and is much more detailed. You may perhaps remember a passage I quoted from her in my first lecture, above page 21. There are many similar pages in her autobiography, where in literature is a more evidently veracious account of the formation of a new center of spiritual energy than is given in her description of the effects of certain ecstasies which, in departing, leave the soul upon a higher level of emotional excitement. Often infirm and wrought upon with dreadful pains before the ecstasy, the soul emerges from it full of health and admirably disposed for action, as if God had willed that the body itself, already obedient to the soul's desires, should share in the soul's happiness. The soul, after such a favor, is animated with a degree of courage so great that if at that moment its body should be torn to pieces for the cause of God, it would feel nothing but the liveliest comfort. Then it is that promises and heroic resolutions spring up in profusion in us, soaring desires, horror of the world, and the clear perception of our proper nothingness. What empire is comparable to that of a soul who, from this sublime summit to which God has raised her, sees all the things of earth beneath her feet, and is captivated by no one of them? How ashamed she is of her former attachments! How amazed at her blindness! What lively pity she feels for those whom she recognizes still shrouded in the darkness! She groans at having ever been sensitive to points of honor, at the illusion that made her ever see as honor what the world calls by that name. Now she sees in this name nothing more than an immense lie of which the world remains a victim. She discovers in the new light from above that in genuine horror there is nothing spurious, that to be faithful to this honor is to give our respect to what deserves to be respected really, and to consider as nothing or as less than nothing whatsoever perishes and is not agreeable to God. She laughs when she sees grave persons of horizon, caring for points of honor, for which she now feels profoundest contempt. It is suitable to the dignity of the rank to act thus. They pretend, and it makes them more useful to others. But she knows that in despising the dignity of their rank for the pure love of God, they would do more good in a single day than they would effect in 10 years by preserving it. She laughs at herself that there should ever have been a time in her life when she made any case of money, when she ever desired it. Oh, if human beings might only agree together to regard it as so much useless mud, what harmony would then reign in the world? With what friendship we would all treat each other if our interest in honor and in money could but disappear from the earth. For my own part, I feel as if it would be a remedy for all our ills. V. Page 229 to 100, 231 to 233, 243. Mystical conditions may therefore render the soul more energetic in the lines which their inspiration favors, but this could be reckoned an advantage only in case of the inspiration were a true one. If the inspiration were erroneous, the energy would be all the more mistaken and misbegotten. So we stand once more before that problem of truth which confronted us at the end of the lectures on saintliness. You will remember that we turned to mysticism precisely to get some light on truth. Do mystical states establish the truth of those theological affections in which the saintly life has its root? In spite of their reputation of articulate self-description, mystical states in general assert a pretty distinct theoretic drift. It is possible to give the outcome of the majority of them in terms that point in definite philosophical directions. One of these directions is optimism, and the other is monism. We pass into mystical states from out of ordinary consciousness, as from a less into a more, and as from a smallness into a vastness, and at the same time as from an unrest to a rest. We feel them as reconciling, unifying states. They appeal to the yes function more than to the no function in us. We feel them as reconciling, unifying states. They appeal to the yes function more than to the no function in us. In them, the unlimited absorbs the limits and peacefully closes the account. Their very denial of every adjective you may propose as applicable to the ultimate truth, he, the self, the Atman, is to be described by no, no. Only say the Upanishads. Muller's translation, part 2, page 180. Which we can share on this channel, can't we? Though it seems on the surface to be a no function, it is a denial made on behalf of a deeper yes. Whoso calls the absolute anything in particular or says that it is this seems implicitly to shut it off from being that. It is as if he lessened it. So we deny this, negating the negation, which it seems to us to imply in the interest of the higher affirmative attitude by which we are possessed. The fountainhead of Christian mysticism is Dionysius, the Areopagite. He describes the absolute truth by negatives exclusively. The cause of all things is neither soul nor intellect, nor has it imagination, opinion, or reason, or intelligence, nor is it reason or intelligence, nor is it spoken or thought. It is neither number, nor order, nor magnitude, nor littleness, nor equality, nor inequality, nor similarity, nor dissimilarity. It neither stands, nor moves, nor rests. It is neither essence, nor eternity, nor time. Even intellectual contact does not belong to it. It is neither science, nor truth. It is not even royalty or wisdom, not one, not unity, not divinity. Our goodness, nor even a spirit as we know it, etc. ad libitum. T. Davidson's translation in Journal of Speculative Philosophy, 1893. But these qualifications are denied by Dionysius, not because the truth falls short of them, but because it so infinitely excels them. It is above them. It is superlucent, supersplendent, super essential, super sublime, super everything that can be named. Like Hegel in his logic, mystics journey towards the positive pole of truth only by the method der absoluten Negativität. Deus propter excellentium non immertio nihil vocatur. Scotus Ergena, quoted by Andrew Seth, 2 Lectures on Theism, New York, 1897, page 55. Thus come the paradoxical expressions that so abound in mystical writing, as when Eckhart tells of the still desert of Godhead, where never was seen difference, neither Father, Son, nor Holy Ghost, where there is no one at home, yet where the spark of the soul is more at peace than in itself, as when Boheme writes of the primal love that it may fitly be compared to nothing, for it is deeper than anything, and is nothing with respect to all things, forasmuch as it is not comprehensible by any of them, and because it is nothing respectively, it is therefore free from all things, and is that only good which a man cannot express or utter what it is, there being nothing to which it may be compared to express it by. And we pass by Peace in Itself. J. Royce, Studies in Good and Evil, page 282, and then Express It By. Quote from Jacob Boehme's Dialogues of the Supersensual Life, translated by Bernard Holland, London, 1901, page 48, are as when Angelus Silesius sings, Gott is ein lauter nichts, ehin ruhert kein Nacht hier, je mecher du Nacht, ehin greifst, je mecher entwind erdir. Oh, I have no idea how that's supposed to go. Cherubinischer Wondersmann, Strophe 25. To this dialectical use by the intellect of negation as a mode of passage towards a higher kind of affirmation, there is correlated the subtlest of moral counterparts in the sphere of the personal will, since denial of the finite self and its wants, since asceticism of some sort is found in religious experience to be the doorway to the larger and more blessed life, its moral mystery intertwines and combines with the intellectual mystery in all mystical writings. Where are we? Love, continues Bethman, is nothing, for when thou art gone forth, wholly from the creature and from that which is visible, and art become nothing, to all that is nature and creature, then thou art in that eternal one, which is God himself, and then thou shalt feel within thee the highest virtue of love, the treasure of treasures, for the soul is where she goeth out of the somewhat into that nothing, out of which all things may be made. The soul here saith, I have nothing, for I am utterly stripped and naked. I can do nothing, for I have no manner of power, but am as water poured out. I am nothing, for all that I am is no more than an image of being, and only God is to me I am. And so, sitting down in my own nothingness, I give glory to the eternal being and will nothing of myself, so that God may will all in me, and being unto me my God and all things. And that's cited from page 42 and 74, abridged. In Paul's language, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Only when I become as nothing can God enter in, and no difference between his life and mine remain outstanding. From a French book, I take this mystical expression of happiness in God's indwelling presence. Jesus has come to take up his abode in my heart, or something maybe. It is not so much a habitation and association as a sort of fusion. O new and blessed life, life which becomes each day more luminous, the wall before me, dark a few moments since, is splendid at this hour because the sun shines on it. Wherever its rays fall, they light up a conflagration of glory. The smallest speck of glass sparkles, each grain of sand emits fire. Even so, there is a royal song of triumph in my heart, because the Lord is there. My days succeed each other. Yesterday, a blue sky, today a clouded sun. A night filled with strange dreams, but as soon as the eyes open, I regain consciousness and seem to begin life again, it is always the same figure before me, always the same presence filling my heart. Formerly the day was dulled by the absence of the Lord. I used to wake invaded by all sorts of sad impressions, and I did not find him on my path. Today he is with me, and the light cloudiness which covers all things, is not an obstacle to my communion with him. I feel the pressure of his hand. I feel something else which fills me with a serene joy. Shall I dare to speak it out? Yes, for it is the true expression of what I experience. The Holy Spirit is not merely making me a visit. It is no mere dazzling apparition, which may from one moment to another spread its wings and lead me in my night. It is a permanent habitation. He can depart only if he takes me with him. More than that, he is not other than myself. He is one with me. It is not a juxtaposition. It is a penetration, a profound modification of my nature, a new manner of my being, quoted from the manuscript of an old man by Wilfred Monod, Il Vit, 6 Meditations sur la Mystère Chrétien, page 280 to 283. Compare... Oh, that's the note for the next page. This overcoming of all the usual barriers between the individual and the absolute is the greatest mystic achievement. In mystic states, we both become one with the absolute, and we become aware of our oneness. This is the everlasting and triumphant mystical tradition, hardly altered by differences of clime or creed. In Hinduism, in Neoplatonism, in Sufism, in Christian mysticism, in Whitmanism, we find the same recurring note, so that there is about mystical utterances an eternal unanimity, which ought to make a critic stop and think, and which brings it about that the mystical classics have, as have been said, neither birthday nor native land, perpetually telling of the unity of man with God. Their speech antedates languages, and they do not grow old. Compare M. Maeterlinck, Le Ornement des Nox Spirituales de Ruysbroek, Roxella's 1891, introduction, page 19. That art thou, says the Upanishads. And the Vedantists add, not a part, not a mode of that, but identically that absolute spirit of the world, as pure water poured into pure water remains the same. Thus, O Gautama, is the self of a thinker who knows. Water and water, fire and fire, ether and ether. No one can distinguish them. Likewise, a man whose mind has entered into the self. Every man, says the Sufi Gulshan Raz, whose heart is no longer shaken by any doubt, knows with certainty that there is no being save only one, and this divine majesty, the me, the we, the thou, are to be found for that one. There can be no distinction. Every being who is annulled and entirely separated from himself hears resound outside of him this voice and this echo, I am God. He has an eternal way of existing and is no longer subject to death. And so the Sufi quote from Schmolders, page 210, and the Buddhist quote, not a Buddhist quote, okay. Upanishads, M. Muller's translation 2:17 and 334. In the vision of God, says Plotinus, what sees is not our reason, but something prior and superior to our reason. He who thus sees does not properly see, does not distinguish or imagine two things. He changes, he ceases to be himself, preserves nothing of himself, absorbed in God, he makes but one with him, like a center of a circle coinciding with another center. Eniad's Valaire's translation, Paris, 1861, volume 3, 561, compare 473 to 477, and volumes 1, page 27. Here, writes Suso, the spirit dies and yet is all alive in the marvels of Godhead, and is lost in the stillness and the glorious dazzling obscurity, and of the naked simple unity, and is in this modeless where that highest bliss is to be found. Autobiography, page 309, 310. Ich bin so groß als Gott, sings Angles Celsius again, ist als ich so klein, kann nicht über mich, ich unter ihm nicht sein.